The sea has always done more than connect coastlines. Across the vast Indo Pacific, shipping lanes, straits, and channels are the nervous system of global trade and diplomacy. In recent weeks, those arteries of commerce have also been a stage for hard power, a place where ships and aircraft no longer just move, they speak. The choreography at sea is being read as message-making, deliberate, calibrated displays of presence whose meanings ripple from Beijing to Washington, from Tokyo to Manila. These movements no longer feel strictly local. Carrier groups, destroyer formations, and maritime patrol aircraft are being watched against a backdrop of major Allied drills, renewed force postures, and political leaderships that have placed defense and deterrence at the top of the agenda. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has steered a more assertive security line. In Manila, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has overseen closer operational ties with long-standing partners. And in Washington, the administration of President Donald J. Trump continues to signal a willingness to use forward deployment and partner exercises to shape regional calculations. In Beijing, spokespeople in the People's Liberation Army answer those moves in kind. The choreography is plain and the meanings are not limited to any single capital. On April 20th, 2026, two converging narratives crystallized. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported that the Chinese aircraft carrier Liaoning transited the Taiwan Strait. On the same day, Allied forces opened the annual Balikatan exercises in the Philippines, a markedly larger and more diversified edition than in previous years. With more than 17,000 personnel from the Philippines, the United States, and partners including Japan, Australia, Canada, France, and New Zealand. Carrier movements, compressed message, and optics. They demonstrate reach, test surveillance and response, and create an image that domestic and international audiences instantly undoes. Tan Beijing frames recent naval task group movements as training, routine drills that prepare forces for sustained operations farther from home. The PLA's Eastern Theater Command and Southern Theater Command have described activities in the East China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and east of Luzon as exercises focused on sea-air coordination, live-fire shooting, rapid maneuvering, and underway replenishment. Satellite imagery and open-source videos circulating online show modern surface combatants operating in coordinated evolutions. Analysts point to the presence of Type 055 guided missile destroyers among task groups. Symbols of China's modern surface fleet. For the PLA, the technical language of exercises is familiar. For everyone watching, each transit carries symbolism. For Tokyo, routine becomes risk when assets move near islands and corridors that have outsized strategic sensitivity. Japanese officials have warned that while international law allows passage through international waters, any violation of sovereign territorial seas would prompt consequences. Those statements are not just legal technicalities. They are political signaling directed at domestic audiences and neighboring capitals alike. For Taipei and Washington, the Taiwan Strait is framed as international waters whose passage should not be a cause for alarm. For Beijing, the same moves are often cast in a different legal and political light. That mismatch of interpretations is the heart of the danger. The Balikatan exercises amplify the counterpoint. Long a cornerstone of US-Philippine security cooperation, this year's iteration expanded in scale and in partners. The drills ranged from amphibious operations and live-fire drills to air and naval interoperability missions, all staged across the Philippine archipelago and waters facing the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. US and Philippine leaders framed the scale and scope as reassurance, proof of Allied capacity to operate together and not stress. For Manila, hosting larger Allied drills as a practical expression of defense partnerships, its leaders say help safeguard sovereignty and maritime rights. For Washington, the exercises are an operational demonstration that alliances and partnerships remain at the core of deterrence strategy in the Western Pacific. Beijing's reaction was swift and pointed. At a press briefing in Manila, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry cautioned that joint military exercises involving the United States, the Philippines, and Japan risk eroding regional trust and stability. Chinese state media and diplomatic commentary amplified that argument, warning that deeper cooperation among US partners near areas of Chinese interest is provocative and destabilizing. Moscow, too, injected a public note of concern. Russia's foreign ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova said that the participation of the Japanese Navy in joint drills with the United States is a cause for concern and increases TET. Science. Those short, sharp statements are meant to shape how domestic and international audiences interpret the unfolding pattern of activity. Yet China's response has not been limited to rhetoric. The PLA's Southern Theater Command confirmed naval drills east of Luzon, placing Chinese surface combatants and support ships within sightlines of key Philippine sea lanes. For commercial mariners, what plays out as strategic messaging becomes a practical calculus. The Indo Pacific contains some of the world's busiest and most economically vital passages. Energy tankers, container ships, and bulk carriers all funnel through choke points where military and civilian traffic intersect. When navies flex, insurers and shippers reevaluate risk profiles, temporary safety zones appear, freight routing changes, and premiums rise. Even absent direct conflict, the perception of risk affects transit times and market expectations. Those are not abstract effects. Port schedules adjust, local fishing pea. Patterns shift. Tourists postpone bookings, families in coastal towns read the headlines and wonder what comes next. Sailors stand watch in grey dawns. Merchant captains plot courses through narrow straits. Decisions made in distant ministries and command centres change the everyday rhythms of island life and coastal economies. The dry line on a chart, a separation zone, a shipping lane, can suddenly feel like a fault line for supply chains. Analysts emphasize that interpretation matters as much as presence. One nation's freedom of navigation operation is another's deliberate intrusion. One country's routine training is another's calibrated coercion. The Taiwan Strait has become the most acute geographic symbol of that ambiguity. When a carrier or a flotilla moves through that narrow corridor, capitals decode intent as much as they track positions. That decoding is never neutral. It is suffused with recent history, political narratives, and the domestic audiences each government must address. In an environment where weapons and sensors compress decision timelines, the need for mechanisms that reduce risk becomes urgent. Military leaders and experts stress practical tools, transparency about scheduled exercises, hotlines between navies, and agreed procedures for incident handling. These are not mere niceties. In an era of compressed timelines, timely communication, and clear investigation protocols, are risk mitigants. A secure, tested channel to clarify whether a radar lock was intentional or accidental, and a mutual process to investigate can prevent a mistake from ballooning into crisis. Those mechanisms are uneven across the region. Some bilateral relationships maintain robust deconfliction channels. Others are less practiced. Political friction can hamper functional military-to-military dialogue. Where communication is weak, so too is the capacity to de-escalate quickly, strengthening forums, encouraging direct military-to-military contacts, and codifying probe. Prestigious four-at-sea encounters would not eliminate competition, but they would lower the odds that an unintended encounter leads to escalation. Preserving freedom of the seas and keeping commercial lines open will require a dual approach. Strength and statesmanship. Deterrence and dialogue are not mutually exclusive. Many regional strategists argue that credible defense postures can be paired with sustained diplomatic engagement. Robust readiness sends signals about capability and commitment. At the same time, sustained channels of communication and mutual confidence building can reduce misperception. The challenge for leaders is to demonstrate resolve without foreclosing avenues for de-escalation. That tension plays out in domestic politics as well as strategic calculations. Leaders must justify readiness at home while avoiding moves that lock them into reflexive escalation. Public rhetoric, carefully calibrated, can reassure domestic audiences without needlessly provoking neighbours. Military drills can test interoperability without crossing red lines that invite retaliatory escalation. In the weeks ahead, the choices made in capitals will determine whether the Indo Pacific navigates a difficult chapter of competition with restraint or drifts into a cycle of risky signalling. There is no inevitability to these tensions becoming conflict. Much depends on the professionalism of sailors and aviators at sea and on the existence of credible practice mechanisms for preventing and managing incidents. The hope among many security professionals is practical and modest. Incremental agreements to exchange notifications of major exercises, standardized procedures for unforeseen encounters at sea, and stronger regional incident investigation mechanisms will not erase rivalry, but they will lower the danger of miscalculation saga. These are the kinds of measures that make commercial mariners, coastal communities, and port operators breathe a little easier for merchants and inshore. There's predictability is the immediate concern. For policymakers, the urgent task is to sustain credible deterrence while creating practical, tested mechanisms for preventing and managing incidents. For publics across the region, the question is whether the new normal in the Indo Pacific will be one of stable competition with clear rules, or one of risky signalling without the guardrails that keep accidents from becoming crises. At sea, actors do not speak only through press releases. They speak with radar tracks, with replenishment at sea, with coordinated air drills, and with movements of platforms whose presence alters tactical geometry. That is why every sail and every sortie is watched so closely. The Liaoning's transit of the Taiwan Strait in April was simultaneously a training movement and a high-visibility signal that shaped reactions across capitals. The Balikatan drills, broader in participation and scope, were meant to test logistics, command and control, and the mechanics of comm. Bind defense under risk conditions across diplomatic and military circles, a recurring aim emerges: deterrence paired with dialogue, preserve capability, practice resolve, but also keep lines open. In that balance lies the best chance to ensure that freedom of navigation and commercial continuity endure even as strategic competition intensifies. Geography concentrates friction. Modern weapons compress decision time. Narratives matter as much as platforms. The actions of one capital prompt recalculations in another. What is intended as a demonstration of capability can be received as a provocation. The practical consensus among many who study the region is simple, if not easy. Readiness must be married to restraint. Deterrence must be paired with dialogue. Preserve the seas not only through patrols and exercises, but through agreements and tested procedures that limit friction for commercial mariners and the communities that live off these waters. In the days and months ahead, the choreography at sea will continue to be a language. Leaders can choose how aggressively that language is used. They can opt for gestures that reassure and deter, or for moves that shorten timelines and narrow options. The healthier path is one that keeps commercial lanes open, reduces the prospect of accidents, and retains room for diplomacy. The risk and the responsibility is real. The rewards for getting it right are profound. A region where strategic competition is managed, trade flows remain steady, and the seas remain a conduit for prosperity rather than a cause for fear. That delicate balance will be tested again and again. How leaders answer that test will determine whether the Indo Pacific writes a chapter of stable competition with clear rules or a chapter of escalating risk. The choices for now remain in the hands of those ashore, and the consequences will be felt by those at sea.